March 5, 2026, Tehran, 2 p.m. local time. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs had called an emergency press conference. Journalists from around the world crowded into the room. Cameras from dozens of international broadcasters were rolling. Something big was about to happen. The Iranian Minister of Foreign Affairs entered the room, walked to the podium, and read a statement. His voice was firm. His words, thunder. The destabilizing presence of American forces in the Persian Gulf will no longer be tolerated. The United States government has 72 hours to begin a complete and total withdrawal of the Fifth Fleet from our territorial waters. Failure to comply will result in the total closure of the Strait of Hormuz. An ultimatum, a red line drawn in the sand. Iran had played its strongest card, its last lever of power. The whole world held its breath, waiting for Washington's response. The silence from the White House was deafening. No statement, no press conference, just silence. But it was not a silence of fear. It was not a silence of hesitation. It was the silence of a calculator, a cold, precise, and ruthless calculator, which was about to present the Iranian regime with a bill of $31.4 billion that it could never pay. To understand the audacity of the Iranian ultimatum, one must understand the fortress mentality that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has cultivated for decades. They did not view the Persian Gulf as international waters. They viewed it as their backyard, a deadly trap designed to bleed any adversary dry. This doctrine, known as anti-access/area denial, A2/AD, was the foundation of their entire military might. They believed they had created an impenetrable three-layered defense. The first layer was a vast network of naval mines ready to be deployed in the Strait of Hormuz, capable of paralyzing global oil trade within hours. Iran had stockpiled more than 5,000 naval mines of various types, including lethal magnetic influence mines and contact mines stored in depots along the coast. A single order would be enough to turn the strait into an impassable minefield. The second layer was the IRGC's infamous swarm, more than 200 Boghammer and Siraj fast boats, armed with heavy machine guns, rockets, and light torpedoes, designed to overwhelm an aircraft carrier's defenses with high-speed attacks from multiple angles simultaneously. The swarm doctrine was simple. Send so many boats at once that the enemy ship's defense systems would become overwhelmed. The third and deadliest layer was a dense network of shore-based anti-ship cruise missiles, such as the Noor and the Qader, Iranian copies of the Chinese C-802, hidden in mobile launchers along Iran's extensive coastline, capable of striking any ship in the Gulf with a 165-kilogram warhead. For Tehran, this combination was the perfect equalizer against American technological superiority. They believed they could inflict such catastrophic damage on the U.S. Navy that Washington would have no choice but to back down. The regime's arrogance was fueled by years of success in asymmetric attacks and the belief that the United States lacked the stomach for all-out war. There was also the economic factor. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's lifeline. 20% of all the world's oil passes through that 33-kilometer-wide channel. Closing Hormuz would be a global economic shock, a financial earthquake that would hit U.S. allies just as hard as its enemies. Tehran believed that this economic power was a lever powerful enough to bend American will. They issued the ultimatum not as a gamble, but as a calculated certainty, a certainty that was about to collide with reality in a spectacular and devastating way. The 72-hour ultimatum began. The world watched in suspense. Oil markets immediately panicked. The price of Brent crude shot up 18% in the first few hours, the biggest single-session jump since the invasion of Kuwait in 1990. European diplomats rushed to Tehran and Washington trying to mediate. The UN convened an emergency session of the Security Council, and the U.S. Fifth Fleet, led by the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and its battle group of 6 destroyers and 2 cruisers, remained at its station in the Arabian Sea, seemingly indifferent to the diplomatic chaos. To the casual observer, it appeared that the United States was paralyzed by indecision. Iran interpreted this silence as weakness. It was the most costly mistake in its history. But aboard the Eisenhower and in the Pentagon's command centers, there was no indecision. There was work. The American silence was not passivity, it was preparation. The President of the United States had signed the order to execute in the first hours following the ultimatum. The response would not be diplomatic, it would be surgical. As the ultimatum clock ticked down, a vast intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance (ISR) operation was underway. Operation Iron Fist had been activated. KH-13 spy satellites, with their centimeter resolution cameras, were redirected to map every inch of the Iranian coastline, identifying every naval base, every mobile missile launcher, every fuel depot. RQ-180 stealth drones, flying at extreme altitudes and invisible to Iranian radars, used their signals intelligence sensors to capture every radio transmission, every IRGC communication, every troop movement. Navy Special Forces teams, the SEALs, operating in secret from Virginia-class fast attack submarines, confirmed priority targets in real time, transmitting precise GPS coordinates to attack planners. What Iran saw as 72 hours of power and pressure, the U.S. used as 72 hours of meticulous planning for execution. They were not deciding whether to attack. They were deciding the exact order in which they would destroy each piece on the Iranian chessboard. The ultimatum expired. Tehran had waited until the last second, convinced that Washington would cave. When it did not, the Iranian regime, instead of backing down, decided to escalate. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps activated the protocol to close the strait. Minesweepers began moving toward the channel. Speedboats were placed on high alert. Radar operators for the coastal missiles powered up their system. Iran, feeling victorious, began moving its forces to close the strait. It was the last and most costly mistake they would make. Exactly 1 minute after the deadline, the American response arrived. It was not a diplomatic response. It was not a press release. It was a storm of steel. Operation Iron Fist began. From the vertical launch tubes, VLS, of 6 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and 2 Virginia-class attack submarines patrolling the depths of the Gulf of Oman, more than 100 BGM-109 Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles roared into the night sky, their blue flames streaking across the darkness like a swarm of shooting stars. Flying just a few meters above the waves to avoid radar detection, the Tomahawks headed for their targets, the command centers of the Iranian operation. The command and control centers in Bandar Abbas and at the Bushehr Naval Base were the first to be struck. Within minutes, the IRGC leadership's ability to communicate with its forces was severed. Simultaneously, from the deck of the USS Eisenhower, squadrons of F/A-18 Super Hornet fighters took off. Armed with AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles and SLAMER air-to-surface missiles, they had one mission: to destroy Iran's coastal missile network. Guided by real-time data provided by drones and satellites, transmitted directly to the pilots' helmets via Link 16, the Super Hornets systematically hunted down and destroyed more than 150 Noor and Qader missile launchers. Every mobile launcher that attempted to change position was tracked in real time by a Reaper drone and destroyed before it could fire. The missile strongholds meant to protect the Iranian coast were turned into funeral pyres, one after another, with precision bordering on the surgical. The first and third layers of Iran's defense were broken in less than 6 hours. Iran had lost its eyes and its teeth before it could even bite. With its command centers in ruins and its missile coverage evaporated, the IRGC Navy was blind and vulnerable. Without communication with Central Command, without the protection of coastal missiles, the commanders of the speedboats were on their own, trying to make decisions without information, without orders, without hope. The second phase of Operation Iron Fist focused on their total annihilation. The fleet of more than 200 Boghammer and Seraj fast boats, the pride and terror of the IRGC, became the primary target. MQ-9 Reaper drones, armed with laser-guided AGM-114R Hellfire missiles, hovered over the ports, coves, and coastal caves where the speedboats were hidden. Using their multi-spectral targeting system, MTSC infrared cameras, they identified every boat, even those camouflaged under nets and foliage. The hunt began. A H-64 Apache attack helicopters launched from Wasp-class amphibious assault ships and AC-13OJ Ghost Rider attack aircraft, the U.S. Air Force's Angels of Death, descended upon the swarm. It was a systematic and merciless slaughter. The fiberglass speedboats, so threatening in theory against a slow-moving ship, were completely powerless against American airfire. One by one, they were turned into balls of fire over the dark waters of the Gulf. The swarm that was supposed to paralyze the Fifth Fleet was wiped out before it could set sail. The attack was not limited to the coast. The U.S. also turned its attention to the militarized islands that Iran used as forward bases in the heart of the Gulf. The islands of Abu Musa and Farsi, which had been transformed into IRGC strongholds over decades, complete with underground hangars, missile batteries, and radar stations, were struck by successive waves of heavy airstrikes. F/A-18 Super Hornets and F-35Cs, operating in perfect coordination, destroyed each facility with surgical precision. Oil platforms that had been secretly equipped with surveillance radars and anti-ship missile stations were destroyed with GBU-38 JDAM bombs. Within 48 hours, Iran's naval power in the Persian Gulf, built over 3 decades and funded by billions in oil revenues, simply ceased to exist. Bases that took years to build were reduced to smoldering rubble. Fleets that were the terror of the Gulf became wreckage at the bottom of the sea. Iran's backyard had become an American firing range, and there was nothing left in the backyard to defend. When the smoke cleared, the scale of the devastation became clear. In Tehran, the IRGC High Command was in shock. They had planned a war of attrition, a long and bloody conflict that would wear down American resolve. Instead, they received a 48-hour execution. The Pentagon released a detailed assessment of the damage, not in military terms, but in terms any regime understands: money. The cost of Iranian arrogance was $31.4 billion. The bill was itemized with brutal precision, line by line, like a demolition invoice sent to a regime that had asked for what it received. The destruction of the Bandar Abbas and Bushehr naval bases, including docks, shipyards, barracks, and command centers, was assessed at $8.2 billion. The IRGC's naval arsenal, including the Boghamar and Siraj fast attack craft, the Moj-class frigates, and the logistics support ships, represented a loss of $6.7 billion. The coastal missile infrastructure, with its more than 150 mobile launchers, target acquisition radars, and ammunition depots, amounted to $9.1 billion in damages. And the destruction of the militarized oil platforms and the island bases of Abu Musa and Farsi added another $7.4 billion to the final tally. Iran's ultimatum did not result in the withdrawal of the Fifth Fleet. The Fifth Fleet remained exactly where it was, stronger and more determined than before. What the ultimatum did result in was the total and irreversible collapse of Iran's military capability in the Gulf. The geopolitical lesson was severe, unequivocal, and permanent. In the 21st century, issuing an ultimatum to the United States is not an act of power. It is a declaration of bankruptcy. Iran demanded that the U.S. leave the Gulf. In response, the U.S. stripped Iran of any say in who stays or who leaves. The balance of power was not merely restored, it was rewritten with fire and steel. For other regimes contemplating the possibility of challenging the U.S. military presence, the $31.4 billion bill is a warning. It is not a threat. It is a demonstration of the real cost of confusing arrogance with power. Iran asked the U.S. to leave. The U.S. stayed. And Iran footed the bill. $31.4 billion. Destroyed in 48 hours. That is the exchange rate of the American challenge in the 21st century. A rate no regime can afford to pay twice.